Hello there, AP English students. Today's presentation will explain to you a strategy called arching, which is a method for analyzing prose passages. And this approach is based on my observation that students oftentimes will start writing their passage analysis essays before they really understand the prompt and also even before they really understand the passage. So this strategy will kind of help you to make sure that you understand both of those things before you start your essay, because it helps you to make observations about both the prompt and the passage that are necessary for you to earn a top score on your essay. So to go along with this presentation, you need the On Seeing England for the First Time passage by Jamaica Kincaid. It's there on your haiku page right alongside this presentation PowerPoint. So please open that on your computer or print it out. You need to be able to kind of click back and forth and be able to see it, so that when I talk about the passage you know what I'm talking about. So maybe even pause this presentation right now and take a minute and read through that passage so you have an idea about what it's about. So step one of this whole process would be to read the prompt closely 2 times. So when you're given a passage analysis task, there's always a prompt, there's always a passage. First thing to do, read the prompt twice. And as you read it, underline keywords. Isolate the overarching issue you're asked to address. There's always something about the writer's rhetorical strategies that you're asked to address. Sometimes you're asked to address them with respect to an overarching purpose, sometimes with an attitude, sometimes even the effect on the audience. Sometimes there's more than one thing you're being asked to address, so you need to make sure that you read the prompt closely so that you don't miss one of the items that you're supposed to address. So the next thing that you need to do is draw an arch. So on a piece of scratch paper you would draw an arch, and then you're going to write the issue or issues that you must address in this essay below the arch. For this particular passage we're dealing with, the prompt asks us about Kincaid's attitude toward England. So that's what I write under my arch. And please excuse my crooked arch, there's a reason I'm not an art teacher. Step 2 is to read the passage 1 time. For this reading, you're just trying to get the gist or the overall idea of the passage. As you're reading though, if you notice rhetorical devices, go ahead and make a note about them in the margin. Try to hear the voice of the speaker and get a sense of the personality, the age, the social class, and the attitude of the person who wrote this piece, and maybe even the circumstances under which he or she wrote it. Don't make any judgments at this point. Don't make up your mind about what the author's attitude is. This first reading, you're really just trying to get a general idea about what it's about. Step 3 is to read the passage again. And this time as you move through the passage, you're going to make notes in the margins about both the specific uses of language and the overarching issue. So what this means is you're going to be labeling rhetorical devices and at the same time jotting down notes about what you think Kincaid's attitude toward England might be. Because remember, that's what the prompt is asking you to do in this passage. If you need to, read the passage a 3rd time. Sometimes we need to go through it 1 more time just to make sure we really understand it. Step 4 is for you to write your original response to the overarching issue. So Kincaid's attitude toward England, what are your ideas about that? After you read through the passage and you've completed step 3, you've jotted down ideas about what you think her attitude is. This point above the arch, you're going to write that down. So when I read the passage, I got the idea that Kincaid is fairly resentful about England. And she's also very cynical about how England was kind of forced down her throat when she was a child. She's kind of rebellious because at the end of the passage she says something about she's kind of happy she was never able to write or draw a correct map of England. She's bitter. There's lots of negative words that go along with her attitude toward England. So my job here is above the arch is to write all of those down. This can be kind of tough because it's not going to state it directly in the passage. You have to infer this. You have to do some critical thinking to figure it out. But if you take the time to do this step, you're going to be able to craft a stronger thesis than normal, and it will actually provide you the insight you need to write a thoughtful, insightful essay. The next step is to write your introduction and thesis, and in reality, most of us are not going to have time to write an introduction for a passage analysis essay, because really on the AP exam you only have 40 minutes. In class you're going to typically have 40 minutes to write an essay. Doesn't leave you a lot of time to craft an awesome introduction. So our focus is really going to be write the strongest thesis that you can. And if you have a strong thesis, it actually kind of takes the place of a mediocre introduction. So I thought of a thesis, and you want to write your thesis kind of on your paper beneath where your arch is. And so this thesis says, Kincaid's attitude toward England includes her resentful recollection of her childhood and her resistance to being formed into the perfect English subject. This thesis really shows that you understood the passage, and it has a very strong stance. The only thing that it doesn't specifically have in it are rhetorical strategies. You could include those in a second sentence and have a 2-sentence thesis, or you could just identify those rhetorical strategies as you go along in your body paragraphs. At this point, you should have spent about 10 minutes making astute observations. You haven't wasted your time, because really you've spent your time thinking about this, seeing all the nuances in the passage so that you can really understand it. You've crafted a strong thesis statement that's going to kind of pave the way for the rest of your essay. So now that you're off to a strong start, you can move through the piece chronologically as you discuss specific strategies that develop your thesis. Don't write your typical 5-paragraph essay. It's actually better to move through the piece chronologically. You may have 5 or 6 body paragraphs, you may have 2 body paragraphs, but don't think that you always have to write a 5-paragraph essay. When you're out of time, end your paper on a strong final note. So in a timed situation, if you're still writing and you realize, oh, I only have about 3 minutes left, yikes, finish up the sentence you're working on your body paragraph, and then move on to a conclusion. It is important to end strongly in your essays. You don't want to restate what you've already said in a formulaic conclusion, so kind of forget about the upside down introductory triangle and the right side up conclusion triangle where you kind of repeat everything that you've said. Instead, think of a strong statement that you can write that will end your essay. Sometimes a good way to do that is to comment on the end of a passage, because a lot of the AP passages will include kind of a shift in tone at the end, or maybe the author makes a strong statement at the end. If you can find a way to comment on the end of the passage, that's usually a good way to tie up your essay. It's better to not have a conclusion at all than to write a formulaic conclusion where you start with your thesis and then you kind of broaden it out to the world as a whole, that typical conclusion formula that you learned in 9th and 10th grade. So that's it for the arching method of analyzing prose passages. I hope you find it helpful. I know that there's a temptation when you're under a time situation to just jump into your essay and start writing because you feel like you only have a certain amount of time. But students who typically write the strongest essays spend about 10 minutes doing a strategy like this or something similar to it. So your next steps are to practice the strategy through the rest of the activities in this module. It says arch the passage or practice arching. I really want you to take some time to do that so that you can get familiar with the strategy, and hopefully you'll find that it's actually very helpful and forces you to spend the time necessary to really understand the passage and the prompt so that you can write the best essay you can write. See you guys later.